Hello.
Hey.
Hey. So today we are going to dance with Darya Efrat. And I say dance, but maybe that's not the right term. I say it because it's the name of the podcast. But the reason I think like I wanted to make dance a more inclusive space of like thinking and reflecting. So that's why I thought it'd be interesting to invite you. But we don't know each other so well.
No, not at all. And thanks for inviting me, despite not knowing me so much. Yeah.
But what I do know of you is you're super approachable. You're very friendly. You are extremely kind. And what I see of yours online is extremely interesting and beautiful. Yeah. But if people don't know who you are, what do you say?
About
About yourself.
Of what I do?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good question. I guess I would say I work interdisciplinarily, performing but not only, and working a lot with materials and space.
Yeah.
But recently, being saying a performance maker.
Yeah.
I think the word maker has been useful to me.
Yeah, because we just met at the new performative practices. Or you were doing the new performative practices, right?
Right, yes.
And I was around the building, lurking in Eskilstuna or Stockholm University of the Arts. But let's jump in, because we can talk and not know who we are.
Right, forever.
But maybe we find more out when we do. So what would you like to do?
Sure. So I don't know if it would be helpful to give a little bit of background. I propose to bring an object today.
Yeah. Shall we say what we brought?
Sure.
I brought some A4 pieces of paper. I had to think if it's even an object.
Yeah, of course it is.
What did you bring?
I brought a sparkly golden decoration.
Yeah. Tinsel.
Tinsel it's called. Okay, there you go.
That's what I know it as.
Okay, I didn't even know, so I learned something new about this object. Yes.
Yeah.
Sparkly gold tinsel.
Okay, so you asked us to bring an object.
Yes, and the reason for that was because when you invited me to join in this session, sort of reflecting on what it is I can offer or what it is I can bring into the dance conversation.
Or our conversation, I guess.
Our conversation, exactly, yeah. And my background is more from visual arts, and then I migrated into performance through circus. And I was thinking a lot about my work with objects, either making objects or within circus is a very close relationship with apparatuses or with objects as collaborators or partners, and it becomes a integral part to the work. So the body exists very much, but it's always in relation to many times an inanimate object. Obviously other bodies as well, but so this is why I thought or asked to bring an object today.
Great. Is there anything specific we're going to do with the object, or?
Yeah. Well, so there's different ways of when I come to work with a new object. There's different ways in which I approach working with the material. Some are more structured, some are less. I did want to sort of shout out to Benjamin Richter, who teaches in the circus department, who has this. He came up with this, I guess, a series of exercises or questions called the language of objects. Also related to object ontology and things like that. And so that is really structured, like going through different senses and I don't think that's not what we're going to do today, but that was something that
Inspired, maybe.
inspired or came in, like someone recommended that his work in relation to work I was doing, and said, oh, maybe this would be helpful or interesting or supportive.
Cool.
So yeah, maybe we will tap in a little bit to his work as well.
Yeah.
Does that explain? I didn't explain so much exactly what we will do.
Yeah, I mean, I understood that he goes through, like, what does it feel like? What can it do? I'm just, if you could say, like, because I'd like to pause and then we go and try something.
Mm-hmm.
So is there, like, anything that you'd like us to do with it? Or is it just to be with it and to explore it somehow?
Yeah, so I would definitely, I would say the first step is sort of to be with it and explore it in relation to its meaning, but also at some point putting that aside.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I approach a new object, I many times try to see first what's its effect on my body,
Mm-hmm.
and what shapes do we form together
Mm-hmm.
with it,
Mm-hmm.
and thinking a lot about the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if you go more in a structured method, like I was mentioning with Benjamin Richter's work, is more like going through sound, through touch, through taste, through distance. So I will throw those out there as maybe like
potential spaces that we can
nice. Exactly, potential things that we can discover in relation to it. But that's like that really is quite structured with writing back and taking notes, and I think for the beginning there's a certain level of playfulness or curiosity that I like to maintain.
Great.
With objects, so I think we can start with that.
Yeah, that sounds great. So just to clarify, like, a couple of words that came out for me, which was like to see how it affects my body, and to sort of try and understand what that is. Yeah. So if someone wants to try at home, then they could maybe find just some object and then do that. Yeah,
and sometimes it's easier to do it with objects that are larger than you, or maybe not larger, but like a substantial size, so that the body can intertwine with them and be more manipulated by the object than the object being manipulated by the body.
Yeah.
And maybe I find it helpful sometimes to film, to then see certain images or certain shapes that I didn't necessarily anticipate or see from being inside or entangled
with it. Entwined.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Cool. Let's have a go, and then we'll come back and have a chat.
Sure. Sounds good.
We're back.
We got lost, and now we're back. Or I got lost in a good way.
Yeah. Me too. It was so very generative. Where did you get lost?
In a way that I was able to forget maybe a certain awareness to physicality and gain a different awareness, but lost in the material in that sense.
Yeah.
And losing track of time also.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, there's a lot in the object when you start looking, and to see what it does or does not do, or how it behaves, and what kind of activities it can lead to. Shall we go through some of them?
Sure. Yeah. I just to say, I think loss is also because my attention is. There's a certain degree of attention on something else, then it allows me to sort of fade away in a way, to a certain degree.
Definitely.
And the focus is on something else. And like I said, I gain other moments of awareness, but a lot of the focus is on the object.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, but there is a quality. I mean, you said that you sometimes use a camera to film yourself, so maybe that allows you not to be with it too much. But I was still allowing the paper to distract me from my body, and then realizing, oh, it has me in this shape, or it has me in this quality or tension or sensation. Yeah, and really simple things for me, like just trying to stand on the sheet of paper and not fall off. And then I was like, okay, how much of my body can I put on there? So my hands and my feet and my elbow, and then can I balance? Can I just have my elbow on the sheet of paper? And trying to somehow approximate myself to the paper. And then another thing I was with was I was throwing the paper in the air, and I was desiring that it would still be floating by the time I threw the next piece in the air. And it also has an approximation towards what the paper can do, what's possible. And also then I'm learning a little bit about how fast I can throw and in what way.
It sort of pushes your body in to generate a movement that you wouldn't necessarily generate if you didn't have the paper.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about that, and the next step of that, of what would it be like to repeat that movement without the object?
Yeah.
And I was thinking about dropping and how the movement of just letting go, and there's the satisfaction of seeing something fall, but when that thing, or when my object isn't there anymore, and just doing that movement, it has a different effect.
Can you do it without it, sort of thing?
Right.
Yeah.
And how certain movements how it could generate certain movements that I wouldn't have done without the object, and that would be interesting to watch even without it. But others that without the object don't really have the same, magnitude to them or effect.
Yeah, I want to try some of the things. I'm if I tried to balance on one spot, I think I would cheat more than I did with the paper. I think I would allow my feet to go wherever, maybe, because I don't have that obvious boundary. Because for me, it has there's a quality of can I do, or what can it do, and can I do what it asks me to do? Because at some point I realized, I could fold the paper, and then all this world of origami sort of appeared in my head, and I was well, I can't do that. But I can do something. And but what you're saying is what can it allow me to be able to know that I can do when it's not there even.
Yeah, because I think when it's not there, then at least for me, then I go into other movement tendencies or patterns, and so having the object allows me to break them, or like you said, creates a boundary or a limit or a framework to move in a specific way that if it wasn't there, I wouldn't move that way.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so I think it can be an interesting tool of discovering new movements.
Yeah.
And like I said, some of them may be interesting without the object, and others maybe not so much. But that's where I find the filming helpful. Also in terms of discovering qualities that I'm not necessarily aware of. And then they appear.
Yeah.
Just because I was doing something with the object.
Yes, exactly. it sort of distracts you from. I think you've sort of said that, but distracts one from oneself in a way. But I also found myself like I was very quickly having the paper in my mouth. And now I'm like, why? Why would one immediately go there? But I was really curious about, can I move the paper without using my hands? And then I was finding myself like trying to push the wind against it and have it like if I'm moving forward, have it like blown against me, up against my chest. And then can I like lie down and then move it across my face with my tongue, and then can I fold it and move it with my face and my mouth and stuff. And so that like there it like provides like an inclusivity of different body parts, which maybe I wouldn't have. I don't think I'd do a dance with that licking and moving my mouth. Although it's really interesting actually, as like and the way that I had to move to keep the paper balanced and things definitely perhaps wouldn't have existed.
Right. And then like trying to replicate that without it.
Right, yeah.
And like remembering that sensation of...
Yeah, the sensation or the just even the direction, right? Like, it has to come from like the chin under the paper, or from the base of the spine to catch it on the ear, or because it surprises you like continuously. I think that it's going to move in a certain way, but then it doesn't, and I have to like adjust. And how important is that sensation for you? Like, do you want to remember the sensation of like having to adjust, or is it say?
Yeah, no, I that's an interesting question. I think that was something I was sort of asking myself as I was working now with this object of like, oh wait, let's say I remove it and I try to repeat that movement. Then those elements are crucial for that movement to look like like it should, rather than or I don't know how to exactly phrase it, but otherwise I'm just repeating something and not having the tension or the weight or the friction that existed while handling the object. Yeah. But I also think what you're saying about not like adjusting to the movement of the paper and it's moving in the direction that you weren't anticipating, and I think that's sort of, not to say that the paper has agency necessarily, but I think that's why I find working with objects interesting, because maybe I have a certain understanding of how they should move or how they move or what their weight is, and then suddenly usually I'm pleasantly surprised to discover new things and have to adapt, like you were saying. Yeah. And I was going to ask you, because you've worked with a number of pieces of paper. Yes. Did you? Because what made you decide to move on to a new piece of paper, or like, how did you feel when suddenly a paper tore?
Yeah, I think I had several relationships. Because your tinsel also tore.
My tinsel tore. Yes.
Tore. Broke. At the beginning, I was working with it as if it was one object, which I did also realize later, that's kind of strange, because... Or is it strange to consider several pieces of paper as one object? Are they not several objects? But then I'm like, but all things have parts. Maybe it is. And then I think I did use it a little bit, like especially when the paper got wet and got a hole in it, because I'd been had it in my mouth quite a lot, I just moved on to another piece of paper. So yeah, there is something about I was working with many objects in a way, and I was starting afresh, as if paper is like constituted by its flatness, its especially A4 paper that I was working with, like its lack of creases, its lack of holes, like that's what I'm working with. That's my object. So if it succumbs to entropy, then I have to move away from it or something. But yeah, I think maybe if I'd stayed with it longer, I would have come back to the ones which I moved away from, maybe. Yeah, I was also playing with proximity right at the beginning as well. Like I put them really far away and I just moved away and moved closer. And now they're everywhere. So it's also nice having at least now, having an object that has this possibility to come together and then disperse and go really big. Actually.
Yeah, and just to describe the space, there's a sensation of like traces in the room, because there's the papers are spread out and folded or crumpled or torn or in different compositions.
Yeah, they're like sculptural. And then your tinsel is very sculptural.
Yes, but like for me, when it tore, it was quite. I had a moment of a small tragedy moment. Yeah. Like I really felt like if I was creating some form of narrative in my movement, then suddenly there was the break. I really felt it. But then, similar to you, I then moved on and focused on the longer piece. But then I went back to it and was feeling the different weights and the different speed in which if I dropped them, how was that?
Yeah.
How they reacted differently. So, but that moment really, it definitely affected my movement.
Yeah, I mean, and also it's something that I feel like you're talking about, and maybe we should talk about that as well, because I frame the podcast as dance, and then we had this conversation where you say, oh, well, I don't have a dance practice, and maybe you're often finding yourself in dance context, especially having worked with new performative practices. I know that, I mean, they're so often situated here in this the dance sort of the building, but I wanted to speak about the choreography of it, which I'm sure is used in circus and other disciplines as well. So maybe it's nice to open that up as well. But I was thinking about how, like when one is trying to recreate a dance, like to understand what is the choreography that is needed or the score that is needed for that dance to emerge, it's so hard. So like, say someone comes and sits on a chair, and then you want to recreate that, and you watch the video and you see like, oh, their shoulder is up and there's this tension and so on, and then you try to like remember all the movements and the way they sat and how they looked, and maybe you want to include other things like the things they were wearing, and then you want to include other things like what kind of emotion or expression or performance do they have, like, and we can keep on adding to this until we have like this huge complex choreography or score. But at the same time, the person who first just walked and sat on the chair, their score was sit on the chair, perhaps. I want to sit down, or like relax, or get be in the room, which means sit on the chair, and so like then the person who is like trying to do exactly everything they did has somehow added a lot of like at least cognitive or physical like activity that perhaps the person who first did it wasn't consciously doing, if at all, and And then there are, of course, even though that their task maybe was just to sit on the chair, there were like 100 other tasks that they had, like, that brought them to that place, which makes me think, sorry to come back, this really long story, of like how choreographies, at least how I understand them, they sort of like, one informs the other, informs the other, and informs the other. So the whatever is preceding what happens becomes the new thing. So even if I had one piece of paper and it never ripped and it never tore, my experiences with the piece of paper before are going to affect how I experience it later on. And there's something uncontrollable about like just this collection of choreographies. But do you think in choreographies when you think about recreating, or what is this relationship to dance and dance space?
Just to comment on what you were saying before, I think there's definitely something very unique about the first time moving with an object. It's sort of like, I don't know if it's as if like you're dating this and you don't know each other, and so there's definitely like a level of familiarity that you gain every time you reapproach the object. And I think within performances that I've done or that I've helped direct, like there is a something that sort of comes back or repeats itself, is sort of this keep it simple, or like or not to act the movement but to do the movement. And I think it's similar with sitting on the chair. Like, yes, maybe all those layers are in the back of one's mind, but in the end, if you just said, just go and sit, then usually that is, that, I guess, produces the movement that I would find interesting. And I think it's a bit with the object as well, of like, especially in the first session of doing things purely because one is interested in it, not because they're trying to look interesting or trying to be sophisticated in any way. And then going into your question about choreography, I guess I think about it in like choreography in going alongside relating. So, how am I relating to this space? How am I, if I'm working with an object, how is the object and how are we relating to each other, to our environment, to the audience? And then sometimes there is a build or like a construction of a sequence of sort of movement that leads to movement so that in that sense it is a phrase, or there is definitely a choreographic element to it. But I think many times the movements, they're sort of, I end up like many times calling them by names of like of a shape that it reminds me of, or like pushing the rock or whatever, and then it somehow creates a segment. So it's I wouldn't say I'm not, I don't find myself within dance context. I do, but because I think it just the way the construction of the movement happens, it maybe comes from a different place.
I mean, we're obviously overlapping, right? We're working with body, we're working with movement. We're I mean, definitely in dance, we're always trying to find ways of like not being too much with the body and try to find like distraction and things. But the thing that really struck me, which felt different, and maybe it is a choreographic thing of like, we spoke about, this is not dance, this is something else. But there was a sense that I was approaching things a little bit more like, what can it do? Which felt very different. And I know that probably in dance, for some people, they work with like, what can it do? But I was wondering if that quality of, what's possible sort of emerged, and if that comes from somewhere in your practice, maybe that isn't so dance related.
Perhaps I think working with material, or coming from a place of working with material, is many times like, what can the material do, and how can I push its limits, and or stretch it, and just see how it could be. I don't necessarily like the word manipulated, but how can it be formed or structured? And I think with circus it's a bit the same, of like, what is possible with the body in relation to the apparatus, or in relation to other bodies. And I think sort of that's how I guess I approach working with an object, of seeing, what can it do, and what can I do with it? And that generates something interesting to me.
No, definitely. And for me, I was really pleasantly engaged, and also because one of the things that I feel like could be confusing was like, or at least it passed my mind, of like, am I skillful enough to do this? And yet what it was emerging was actually appreciating what I was already able to do, which was drastically different to like at some point, because I was throwing the paper, for example, I was like, well, this could be juggling, right? Or it potentially is juggling of some type. And I was like, but I'm obviously not juggling with the sense of like, I have the skill to keep all three balls in my hands and moving in the air. And yet I found it a pleasantly interesting to be with this material of paper and to see how it floats, and if I can get another piece up before it lands, and like what's possible within those realms. And it really broadens my understanding of like what's possible, because then it's less about sort of an able body being able to do a specific thing, and it's more about look at what's interesting with what I can do. I don't know.
But that makes a lot of sense to me. Also in the place of going back to the initial instruction of curiosity, of like, how can I stay interested in the movement of exploring also something new. And also going to what you were saying about, am I skilled enough to do this? I think it's interesting to, when I've watched, sometimes I've seen performances with materials with people who don't work with material, and you feel that that they're in the body, and there's a certain like very specific kind of manipulation of the object, rather than trying to be in a conversation with it. I'm not trying to like I said, give agency necessarily to the objects, but I think there is an element of listening that needs to exist when doing this kind of work.
Interesting. Because when you were saying it, I was like, is it that they haven't spent enough time with it?
Perhaps.
But you're also suggesting that it has a lot to do with a type of listening, or that you give agency to it. And you keep stumbling over this concept that the material can have agency, because you're like, it has agency. Well, not really, but I think I understand what you mean. There's something about, if I stay with it, I can get to know more what it is actually doing. I work with babies, 2 months till 18 months year olds. And I work with a lot of objects with them, and one of the things that I was working with was trying to understand what are they dealing with when they are with a material, say some rubber gloves or a sponge or I don't know, whatever, a dress or whatever. And we would try to understand the sort of developmental qualities of a baby, so they can hear, they're sensing through taste, they have these sensorial organs just like we do. But what I would find is in the encounter is that I think they are experiencing touch, for instance, but in fact they seem to be more invested in the hearing, and perhaps even that it would be between hearing and touch. It's not even defined as one or the other, but their interest is somehow floating between the materials, and they are somehow, extremely listening or conscious of like what it is and how it's functioning.
Yeah. But also, it's like, you're saying maybe sometimes in certain performances there hasn't been enough time devoted to being with the object. But I feel like it's a bit of a delicate line, because if you are too much with the object, then like you sort of lose. There's a potential. It doesn't necessarily happen, but potential of losing a certain quality of freshness of just sitting on the chair rather than as acting sitting on the chair.
I think you mentioned it at the beginning, like allow for the joy and the play, and let's not do it too strict. Let's not have like that. We could go through the sound and through the texture and different qualities and keep coming in and out of the material, but to allow us to enjoy the surprise and the curiosity. It's very rewarding and very exciting. And so, just out of curiosity, do you manage to find foreign objects? Like, how does that process work for you in the choosing of an object?
That's a very good question. I think in the different pieces I've done, it's either been objects that I've sort of constructed myself, and how every phase or every segment of the object to be allows a different kind of movement. Or it's been mundane objects that I've been pleasantly surprised of, like removing some of the meaning and seeing and finding new meanings of the shapes that are formed by just putting my body alongside the object. And then I've also was thinking about, before coming here, because sometimes I've also worked with spaces, and sort of like it's a massive object in a way, and being immersed in that object, and how to approach discovering a space and moving within the space in a way that would be different from just entering a space and being in it. So I think, to answer your question, it differs depending on the context in which I'm in. But I was also interested, like in NPP, in the master program, I was also curious about the multiplicity of bodies and sort of not thinking about them as objects, but how if you arrange them in a certain way, like the choreography of the body, of bodies in relation to each other, what kind of meaning does that produce as well? So I think it comes down to what is the meaning of the relationship that is formed between my body and other bodies, and that expands to inanimate or space.
Because I guess in a way my question was a little bit like, how does it stop? Like I'm a little bit like, okay, because when I was choosing the paper I was a little bit like, I'm not sure. And even when we were here and you were saying, it's good to have something bigger than you, and I was like, oh no, I chose paper, it's very small compared to me. Yet it was still super rewarding, and it taught me so much, or gave me so much things to play with. And I'm like, So if that can happen with paper, then well, surely it can happen with everything, you know, like a chair, a table, or the floor, or the room, and the world, and the tree, and the mouse, and you know, my bed, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
No, it becomes, there's something very like playground like about it. When you talk about getting entwined, like I have to think of like a climbing frame, and how you like to put your body in between all the holes and hang off it, and to sort of get stuck in there somehow.
Yeah.
But it feels like doing that, but with everything in a way, or potentially.
Yeah. And maybe just to say, it's not necessarily better to do it with a bigger object. It just it maybe pushes your body in a different way.
No, I understood that. I was just
Yeah.
I was a bit disappointed that I didn't have a bigger
Oh,
object
no.
to push myself.
but your object expanded and multiplied, so it definitely pushed.
But the next time, I'm gonna work with the sofa.
Yeah, sofas are great. I actually did a few sessions here with the. Do you know the there's this mat this black mat that's rolled
like,
up in the hallway, like an acrobatic mat.
Yeah. So it's like a cushioning mat. So when you
Exactly.
fall and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, but there's one that is rolled up. It's a long. Sort of like a.
So it's like a cylinder then.
Exactly.
With a hole through the middle.
Exactly, but then when
But
you,
it's huge as well.
it's massive, yeah. But then, and so that's a really fun object too, because it also there's a stiffness there's also it could transform its shape, and there's a sculptural element which I really enjoy also.
Yeah.
Anyway, just to say, like, there's like you said, it's a there's a playfulness or playground element aspect to it that is very fun.
Yeah.
To do, yeah.
No, it's beautiful. Thank you so much. I hope we get to do this again and bring a new object or find a new another way into the practice and stuff. And I hope people at home also manage to try something inside here.
Yes, I hope so too. I hope it wasn't too vague. And thanks again for inviting me.
No, of course. But
it's a lot of fun.
Also, if people want to reach out to you and get to know more about your work, or get to talk to you perhaps and see stuff, you have an amazing website, right? It's quite good. I really enjoyed finding it.
Thank you, that's kind.
And it's just your name, Darya Efrat .com, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you're also on Instagram.
I'm on Instagram, also my name.
Yeah, and I will link them in the description of the podcast.
Super, thank you.
Is there anywhere else people can find out what you're doing?
Just message me. Feel free to reach out. I'm on Facebook, but not that active. So.
Oh yeah. I always forget about Facebook.
I'm really not a fan.
Cool.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. It means a lot, and it means a lot to also challenge this. I don't know. Yeah, I'm a bit like, why did I call it Peter Dance With? Because it's why does it have to be dance?
Because that's the context in which you're in.
Maybe.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I'd like to pretend that it's like, oh, I want to play with people. I want to like explore with people. Like dance in a very like common expression way, rather than we are going to define a new aspect of what dance can be. But also that, maybe. Anyway, it's been a pleasure. I'm so grateful.
Thank you very, very much. Yeah.